So let me take this, my pleasure to act as a session chair. I'm Hiroyuki Ida from Japan. I'm working somehow long years with Yap, because he was my PhD. So anyway, I'm not sure why this session has an interesting topic, say theory, but you will better know better than I during this session. I hope you enjoyed this session. This session has three lectures. For the first lecture, I would say the board game or any kind of the game can be featured by branching factors. For example, Western chess might have, say, branching factor average, say 27, or say sometimes say 35, something like Japanese chess, we call it shogi, has 80 branching factor average, or Ego, which has say 20, 240 or something like branching factors. But as for the combinatorial game, as interestingly can easily change if you change the size of the board size. For example, I would say any kind of combinatorial game, if you change the size of it, I would say easily change the branching factors. Yes? So therefore, somehow difficult for computer game programmers to have a good, strong program for a combinatorial game. Yes? For example, a game of Sprague, actually where the target game in this talk is like in that case. Yes? We can enjoy this, how we can do this programming for such a combinatorial games. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Cameron Browne from Queensland University from Australia.
Okay, I'm Cameron from QUT in Brisbane. I'll be talking about boundary matching for interactive sprouts. So I'll cover the game of sprouts, its move complexity, a method for simplifying the complexity, and a method for speeding up move generation by boundary matching. So Sprouts is a two-player pen and paper game invented by mathematicians Conway and Patterson almost 50 years ago. The two players start with n vertices or dots, and each turn, well, the players alternate turns drawing a path from one vertex to another or to itself, such that no paths cross and no vertex has more than 3 paths coming from it. And after drawing the path, the player adds a new vertex on the path, and the last player to move wins. So at the bottom, we have a size 2 game, starting with 2 vertices. Here's a player 1 move joining the 2 vertices and adding a new vertex. Player 2 move, player 1 again, and player 2. So the vertices highlighted are dead. They have 3 paths coming from them, so they play no further part in the game. There are 2 live vertices, but they're not connected. So player 1 can't move, and player 2 wins that game. So the known properties of the game are that every game must last at least 2n moves, and will last at most 3n minus 1 moves. And there's a conjecture that the player 1 will win if n mod 6 is 0, 1 or 2, and player 2 will win otherwise. And this hasn't been proven, but it is true for every game that's been solved so far. And games have been solved up to 32 dots and a few beyond that.
There was one remark yesterday by Guy Hayward that now we have, for the communication, we have your sheets, but we don't see you speaking because the camera is not taking camera Browne, but only the seats by camera Browne.
Okay. Is
there a solution that you sometimes stand there or whatever?
Yeah, I'll try.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so there are 2 basic move types. First is simply joining 2 different boundaries, which are single dots in this case. And the second move type is joining a boundary to itself, which partitions the region into 2 separate partitions. These move types, if we look at the opening moves, have a polynomial factor, but the partitions introduce an exponential factor, which leads to some pretty quick growth in the opening moves. So for 20 dots, we're looking at 10 million opening moves already. This is a catalogue of all opening moves for the 4-dot game. The top row shows the 2 boundary moves, and the 32 others are the partitions of the single boundary moves.
You're not reducing isomorphisms, are you?
Sorry?
You're not reducing isomorphisms, are you?
It turns out that these positions all stem from these 3 basic invariants. So all of the top row are equivalent to this position, and all of these are either a single boundary move that partitions 0 and 3 dots, or a single boundary move that partitions 1 and 2 dots. So the key to handling the complexity is to find these invariant moves. The typical representation for squares is to give each vertex a label. So we have the vertices making up boundaries, the boundaries making up regions, and the regions making up independent subgames, which create the position. So here these 2 vertices are dead. They have 3 paths coming from them. So here we have an independent subgame, which is independent from the rest of the position. So this position has 17 vertices, 9 boundaries, 5 regions and 2 subgames. And we describe it by a string representation by following each boundary and just listing the vertices that we encounter. So this slash partitions the 2 subgames, and the semicolons partition each region. Now to simplify this, we can apply some simple rules. We basically relabel vertices with 0 or 1 lives. 0 or 1 paths coming from them. We eliminate dead vertices and dead boundaries. We relabel some vertices that occur twice. And most importantly, we relabel boundaries that occur within a region with lowercase letters, and vertices that cross regions with uppercase letters. So taking this string representation, we can reduce this to this form, and if we sort this string lexicographically, then we get the canonical invariant of this position. And this is actually too expensive to do in practice, so normally a pseudo-canonicalisation is performed. So the improvement of canonicalising means that we reduce from this exponential term to this linear term when generating the opening moves. But this is still too slow for interactive play if we have to generate all candidate moves before reducing to the canonical forms. So if we look at the n equals 20 case, if we generate all 10 million moves first before canonicalising to the 11 variant forms, then that takes around 3.5 minutes on this laptop. So instead, what I do is I use a boundary matching method to avoid duplication and make it a more direct generation of the invariant forms. So here's an example position with 5 boundaries. Now, if we look at region 1 boundary, region 1, it has 5 boundaries, 6 boundaries. It's obvious that the I and the J singletons are equivalent, and it's obvious that the BC boundary and the GH boundary are equivalent. They're also equivalent to the AK boundary because it has 2 vertices with 1 live that open onto region 1. And DF is a separate boundary relative to the others in region 1. So we can label each of these with an invariant group, an equivalence group, equivalence 1, 2 and 3. And so when it comes to move generation, we only need to select one representative of each of these equivalence groups. So for the double boundary moves, we generate moves from and to a representative of each of these equivalence types. So here we have a multi-set of equivalence types, and these are the pairs that we generate moves for. And we just select, for each of these, we just select one boundary of equivalence group 1 at random and so on. For the single boundary moves, we choose a representative of each equivalence type, and then we create partitions according to the power set of the remaining boundaries. So for boundary moves from and to vertex 1, we generate these partitions. So these are the algorithms. We select a from, for the double boundary moves, we select a from boundary, we select a to boundary, and we generate moves between the live vertices on those two boundaries. And for the single boundary moves, we select a boundary of type T, and we generate each partition for that boundary for each live vertex. So a further optimisation is that we only really need to match the singleton vertices in practice. And this works out well because they're trivial to detect and match. And this is a graph of the branching factor. So the branching factor is typically highest very early in the game when there are a lot of these singleton boundaries. So applying this method reduces the runtime to less than a millisecond, even for the n equals 20 case. So rather than generating all 10 million cases and canonicalising to the invariant forms, we only generate 21 cases to find the 11 forms. So this allows interactive speeds of play. So looking at the 10 dot case, without the boundary matching, the move times tend to start quite high and drop sharply, whereas with boundary matching, the move times for the opening moves are negligible. They increase slightly, but as the branching factor drops, then they decrease as well. So that works out quite well. So in summary, boundary matching allows faster move generation. It's very simple, it's very effective, and it should allow interactive play for larger games that are unsolved. And I'll just conclude with a plug for a new journal, Game and Puzzle Design. This will be out later this month. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now time for, let's say, question or discussion. Ingo, please.
I played Sprouts against one of the programs I could download in the internet, and I had almost no chance. Is there a way to introduce handicap levels in Sprouts?
Yeah, what I would do is start with the higher number games that haven't been solved, starting with, say, 33 dots.
Yes. But say, of course, when you have only 3 dots, the games are short, and after, say, 10 or 20 games, it always is running more or less the same course. Is there another way of handicap?
Just use Monte Carlo tree search to get good but not perfect moves, maybe.
Thank you. Interesting question. Any other questions? Okay.
Is it easy to explain why 31 are solved and 34? 33, isn't it?
It might be to do with the mod 6 fact that it is easier to solve player 1 wins than player 2 wins, or vice versa. I can't remember which. I think that's the reason.
Yeah.
Any other questions? So let me take my presentation. So what would be appropriate size and to play for human players? Just a flexible end.
Yeah, I think the size 6 game is reasonably complex. Yeah, that's a good size, and not too long.
Do you have any good reason?
Just the game length is reasonable length. Yeah, 20 moves.
20 minutes to finish.
You're yourself a Sprout player.
No, I'm not.
Okay. And you, Ingo, you are or not?
I thought, but then the bot crashed me in such a way, I think I'm only a beginner.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm more interested in developing an app and the challenges of handling the free-form input.
Yes.
And I'm working on that at the moment.
And the idea of game puzzle design, that is that you also would like to generate more of these games.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
not yourself, but people, your community, so to
Yeah,
speak.
people
Yes.
or computers.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And what is your expectation, not of the journal, but of the number of games or whatever? It's an infinite number?
I think so, yeah.
Yes,
They'll continue to
yes,
increase.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yes, more and more people get interested in it.
Yes, and then I have two more questions, yes. That is about the aesthetics and about the, not the complexity, but I would say the likeliness for people to play that game. The attractiveness for people to play a game. Could you say something about that?
Okay. From like an intellectual, abstract perspective?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd say that uncertainty is the key. As the longer a game remains uncertain, the players remain interested.
Okay.
That's what I've always found.
There's kind of excitement, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
And surprise.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, okay. And the aesthetic point. You know, in chess we sometimes have by Mr. Ingbal some, I would say, investigations on what is, let's say, an aesthetic, very good move, or what is less aesthetic. You understand? Is that also holds on for game design too?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And aesthetic game design
Yes.
will embed the rules in the equipment, so the rules
Yes.
can be very simple,
Yes.
and the equipment sort of tells the players what is required.
Yes. Do you think that there will come a point that you have such a complex system that the human being doesn't have any clue where to start with playing the game? Let alone solving, I mean playing a reasonable game. Like for instance, Ingo already said that he played Sprouts, but he had no clue how to address the strategy of his opponent.
Yeah, I think, again, Monte Carlo tree search provides a good starting point.
Well, that's for programs. That I
Yeah, the
understand.
point is, as a human, how
Yes.
do I get more fun?
Yeah, yes, that's my question, yes.
I have got an answer for that.
We both mean that if the Monte Carlo tree should say you should play Q5 or whatever that means, yes, you can or imitate Q5, but you would like to know a kind of clue why Q5 is such a good move, or is a move which is acceptable to play.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was for the player to work out. That's part of the fun of playing the game, learning the strategies.
Okay, yes. Yes. Now I think we have interesting times in front of us.
Okay.
Okay,
Like
thank
that.
you.
Thank you. That's good discussion. So once again, thank you for the speaker.